Built in 1908, the Singer Building stood tall and proud against New York's iconic skyline. It briefly held the record for the tallest building in the world, but still holds the record for the tallest building to ever be dismantled in NYC, according to Kelsey Campbell Dolligan of Gizmodo. The New York Times claims that the Singer Building's demolition is considered by some to be one of the greatest failures of the early preservation movement. From the Big Apple to the Windy City, gorgeous historic architecture has been both dismantled and demolished. The Garrick Theater opened in 1892, just a year before Chicago hosted the World's Fair. When news of its demolition spread, there was one of the earliest organized public outcries in Chicago to save an historic building, said Brian Kraft and Ray Martinez in a recent article. Many photos of the demolition were taken by photographer Richard Nickel, who was also an early preservationist. Sadly, these photos and a few small pieces of the theater are all that remains. Opened in 1909, Birmingham's terminal station saw many people come and go on the trains that passed by. According to a blog post by Madison Underwood, a social media specialist for the Southern Regional Media Group, as fewer and fewer traveled by passenger train, the station fell into despair. Efforts to restore the station or find another use for it were made. Office space, an aviation museum, and a transportation museum were among the proposed uses, but they were ultimately unsuccessful. The demolition began on September 22, 1969. In Kelsey Campbell's Gizmodo article, 9 of the most beautiful buildings we ever tore down, the Wabash Terminal in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania makes the list. Described as the most beautiful railroad building west of New York by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the greatest Beaux Arts skyscraper in the city by others, the Grand Wabash Terminal only lasted from 1904 until 1954. It was partially destroyed after 2 fires made it virtually unusable. Heading back to the Big Apple, the demolition of Penn Station is considered a black mark in preservation history by many. Campbell Dolligan states that it is the demolition that united concerned citizens and architects to create the movement that we today know as historic preservation. Built in 1910, Penn Station only stood for 53 years. Demolition began in 1963. The station was demolished only to be replaced by Madison Square Garden, a sports arena. Touching down in my hometown of Mount Clemens, we come to a modern-day tragedy known as St. Mary's School. Built in 1889, the 2-story building offered many modern amenities for its day and age. From 1889 to 2013, teachers, students, and faculty passed through its doors and roamed the halls. Over the years, St. Mary saw and educated many generations of students. By 2013, the school building was well over 100 years old and falling apart. The running joke during my time there was that the building was being held up by prayers and many coats of paint. Run down and in need of repairs, St. Peter Church, the parish of St. Mary, bought a newer school and moved all of the students into that building to start classes in the fall of 2013. The old brick building sat empty for nearly 4 years before being demolished. The memories of the building and the life it once had will forever haunt its many alumni, and the question of whether or not the building could have been saved rests uneasily in the back of their minds. I took to Twitter to find out how something like this could happen to a building I practically grew up in. A simple poll revealed that 60% of people who voted would rather have had St. Mary's saved instead of having a parking lot and grotto in its place. Every one of these buildings was an iconic landmark in their cities. The public fought for each of them to be saved instead of demolished, yet they still fell. In a world where our cities are overcrowded and land is limited, our historic buildings often become rubble to make way for new, pricey high-rises and skyscrapers. The buildings become lost in time, with only a few photos to prove their existence. Demolition should be the absolute last resort for our historic buildings. The cost of restoration may be high, but history can't be rebuilt.